Alright, let's talk about how the furry fandom is growing at an exponentially high rate, to the point where it might be a little bit concerning, especially if you look at the statistics on it. Wow, look at this, Beta using his background and degree to talk about furry? No, someone else already did it. I'm just going over the work someone else did. Welcome to Boodles. In all seriousness, this has been a question that's been on my mind ever since I did that video back in February about furry conventions growing at a very rapid rate. And you know, it's a good thing for many cons that are small or local to me that haven't grown as much as like Anthrocon or MFF or all these other big mainstream cons. It's been nice to see the smaller local cons get a bit more oomph, get a bit more of growth rate, having a lot more people attend them. And I made that video back in February because I saw MFF and Anthro New England growing at pretty impressive rates. Like MFF had just hit over 15,000 attendees and is still the biggest furry convention to date. But just seeing these cons grow and grow to very, very big proportions is really cool to see. But it's also kind of concerning, especially if statistics continue the way they have, with exponential growth continuing more and more and more as years go on. If the percentages stay the same, then cons are going to be a bit too big and a bit too overcrowded. And so I want to talk about this idea today, but I specifically want to do so by going over an article that one of my friends known as Soatok put together about how furries are losing the battle against scale. And so I want to go over this article, blog post today, kind of give a synopsis breakdown as to what he talks about and give some of my thoughts and opinions on it. Also, I know it goes without saying, but please go and show some love and support to Soatok. I'll leave the link to his Dull Moments blog in the description below, along with the link to this specific article. This was a very, very good read when I went through it initially, and that's why I want to go over here today, okay? But without further ado, let's get started with this read. Furries are losing the battle against scale, and it's a scale issue. Many of the most annoying and pervasive problems with the furry fandom, from the cyclical nature of Twitter discourse to the increasingly frustrating issue of furry convention main hotel registration selling out immediately after opening, are entirely predictable if you know even a little bit of mathematics. And this is just kind of what I've known about Soa for a while now. He takes a lot of these issues that happen very frequently, like a cycle, repeating problem within furry, and breaks it down in a mathematic sense to understand when they're going to happen, if they're going to happen, and how to potentially understand them better, which I like. And it's going to get worse. If you don't believe me, read on. But Soa, my whole thing is being a dumb animal online. Why would I know any mathematics? Oh, that is no argument. Are you kidding me? The amount of furries that are in STEM or some mathematics-based major is crazy. This video from Colorado professor Albert Bartlett is a must-watch. He even leaves a too long didn't watch. Your intuition for exponential equations and what sustainable growth looks like is probably dead wrong. And now we move on to the numbers. Gimme the numbers. Wikifur has historical data on furry convention attendance. Let's start with a list of furry conventions with the highest attendance in their most recent year. And we went over a little bit of this in my previous video about furry convention growth, where Midwest Fur Fest had over 15,000 attendees. FWA this year just barely hit over 15K as well. Anthrocon last year, 13.6K. TFF, 8,000. FC, which is still a pretty local con from what I know, still hit nearly 6,000. Megaplex, which I thought was a pretty medium, small-sized con, has grown to a pretty substantial size. And same thing with my local con, A&E. I didn't even know they had over 4,000 attendees this year. It didn't feel like it, but that's also because I wasn't at the convention space as much as I could have been. Note, we can make a similar analysis for most furry conventions that have historical data available. For ease, I'm going to focus on the more popular events. So pretty much it's just an analytical breakdown of all the top cons from the past, like 5 that we saw over here. Furry Week in Atlanta grew by an average of 26.3% or 25.9% if you only look at 2015 to 2024. That is insane. Texas Furry Fiesta saw an overall growth rate of 31.8% since its first year, 2009, and a growth rate of 17.4% over the past decade. So pretty much to summarize this whole breakdown, furry conventions have a pretty impressive growth rate. Based on the past couple that we saw above, a lot of these cons have grown at a very, very high rate. It is a staggering amount. It is like a slope that goes straight up into a bell curve. I'm not even joking. Okay, if you haven't watched the video and aren't good at math, that maybe sounds a little sustainable. Healthy growth for a community, right? Well, let's use the past 10-year average growth rate to make some predictions. Anthrocon attendance grows by 12.6%, which corresponds to an attendance doubling in 5.5 years. Midwest Fur Fest doubles in 3.9 years. Furry Week in Atlanta, 2.7 years. Texas Furry Fiesta 4, Megaplex 2.7. If the growth rate keeps up, for example, we can expect Furry Week in Atlanta to have approximately 60,000 attendees by 2035. 11 conventions in the future. If you think the FWA elevator wait times were long this year, just let the current growth rate keep up. But speaking from the statistics and growth rate, this is something that can happen. Look, I'm all for the furry fandom growing and furry conventions growing. I don't know if I want to go to a furry convention with 60,000 people. I don't know if I want to. Now, if it was like a citywide festival sort of thing, that could be pretty cool. But even still, I don't know if there's any support for that sort of happening. What about furries that don't go to conventions? We see exponential growth in the furry fandom outside of convention attendance too. 2015 average daily registered, 658. 2019 average daily registered, 952. 2023 average daily registered, 1,442. That is exponential growth. When the time span is about the same and the growth rate increases, that is exponential growth. And that might not be good for conventions. I mean, it's great in the grand scheme of furries, seeing how much people are becoming furries, especially recently. Ever since like 2022, things have just blown up exponentially with the amount of people either wanting to become furries, just downright becoming furries, or wanting to participate in the fandom in some way, shape, or form. And whether or not these average daily registers are legit, or if it's just, bot accounts registering for it, you gotta understand, even though correlation isn't equal to causation, seeing these numbers, along with seeing the growth rate for furry conventions, I feel like there's some equivalent to that here. What do the numbers mean? Simply put, the furry community is growing at a breakneck exponential speed. Given that the world population is growing at 0.8%, it may be tempting to assume that, in a few short decades, the entire world will be furry. That is not the case, and that's just not going to happen. That's, even though there are analytics here and statistics, and it might seem scary with exponential growth of furries, it doesn't mean it's going to be set in stone that's going to happen for the next few years. I want to keep that in mind. These are just numbers. They can only predict the future so much. In the end, it's going to come down to whatever happens. But it's something to prepare for. Exponential growth cannot continue forever. You will always run headfirst into some sort of carrying capacity or limiting factor that impedes growth. Every exponential curve eventually becomes an S-curve. Where are we headed now? Based on the numbers presented above, let's think about what risks the furry community could be aimlessly blundering into right now. I must stress that this is not a realistic threat model of the future, but an examination of what could go wrong. Exactly. Nothing's set in stone. Things can change with time. You can only know so much. But we can make a somewhat educated guess on the trajectory we're on. So let's do that. Know your limits. What limiting factors could the furry fandom's explosive growth encounter in the near future? That's a broad question to ponder, but one possibility that comes to mind is that while there is an exponential growth in a furry participation, i.e. convention attendance, there is not an accompanying exponential growth in the quantity of conventions themselves. So there aren't as many furry conventions being made and popping up to sustain the growth of furry. There are furry conventions popping up more and more, but they're not being created at a rate that can support the growth. And so it is not sustainable. The demand for convention attendance is a bull market, but the supply is more or less static. If things continue at the same pace they're currently marching, conventions will become increasingly overcrowded, but the problems will not stop with just that. Convention registration costs will rise, to little benefit for attendees. Some of that money will be spent on big, non-fandom performances from celebrity headliners, which will drive some non-furries to attend as well, further exacerbating the crowds. I feel like this part is referencing a furry convention that happened just recently. Wonder which one that could be. But in all seriousness, this is something that has happened. Furry convention registration costs have risen. At the last convention I went to, it was the first one where base registration was in the 3 digits, as in $100 to register for the con. And I get, it goes towards things in the end. And, some of them could be questionable in what I want to support and what I would want out of the con, but at the end of the day, it goes towards the con, and that's all that really matters to me. Registration, elevators, the dealer's den, and artist alley, and even the fucking stairwells will have unreasonable lines of people waiting to use them. There will be calls for gatekeeping, rooted in nostalgia for simpler times when there were fewer of us to try to accommodate. Convention staff will eventually buckle under an exponentially rising amount of pressure. People will burn out. It won't be pretty. And you know what? I do see this potentially happening if things do continue to get worse. I mean, we see it a lot time and time again. Whenever there is some sort of rumor room lottery or rooms are open for a big convention, there's always some uproar about it on furry Twitter. There's always some argument made that ends up being the dumb take of the day that I end up going over and saying, hey, this is a dumb take. Let's look at what's actually happening. I mean, I've done that before. I've talked about how there was an uproar with like MFF, with that convention having a lottery system and people being up in arms about that. And, I get the concern about it, but, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes for people that are managing this. If you're angry about it, don't take it out on con staff. There are proper ways to express your feedback, obviously not an anger-induced state all the time, especially since these are being put together by volunteers in the community. And so that's just a point to be made within many of these different factors about a furry convention even happening. Meanwhile, drama YouTubers, maybe that's me, or whatever platform or vestige they adopt in the future, will be collectively increasing Orville Riddenbacher's quarterly sales with the content they can farm from this discontent. For me, it's a little bit of a yes and no. Yes, I do make videos on the internet about drama and even discussing this point here. That's making videos about some topic that could happen in the future, it could not happen in the future based on analytics. But the way I see it, I don't talk about drama for the sake of just talking about it. I like to talk about it because I like to offer a solution, some sort of answer, some sort of appeasement with it. I don't want people to be more up in arms and angry about it. I want to help people understand many different sides to things. That's why I talk about the furry convention drama. That's why I'm talking about this, because it has relevance to what I've discussed in the past. Because at the end of the day, the more you know and the more we can learn about many different sides, hopefully the better off we'll be and the less angry we'll be. I guess in some sense, I'm not really a drama YouTuber, even though I am. It's weird. That's a whole argument, but hey, maybe I'm calling myself out here. But regardless, that sounds bad. Surely other furries are aware of this explosive growth. Of course, but they mostly think it's a good thing. For example, it is a good thing and it's a bad thing. Not everything is a perfectly wonderful good thing. You got to think about the other sides of it. So anyways, despite all that, what can we do about it? The answer, I don't know. And at the end of the day, not a lot of us will know. With furry conventions and how they're run, I'd like to think, especially with the exponential growth behind conventions, it all comes down to the con staff and what they're going to do about it or how they're going to handle it. And I'm sure, even though this blog post is relatively new and there's not a big drama topic on furry Twitter about how furry conventions are growing at a rapid rate and it might be dangerous, I'm sure there are people on staff at conventions that are already thinking about or talking about this. I don't think it's a case where people are just going to sit back and let this happen, especially, well, hopefully after this video that I do, it could give some food for thought for the right people that might need to hear about it. Sure, I have some ideas that might help in some way. A couple of them are, 1, embrace virtual reality. VR chat. You know what's happening right now? Even though I'm recording this video, Furality. Instead of being at Furality, I'm talking about furry stuff and Furality. It's much easier to scale up VR servers on the fly than it is to just accommodate thousands more furries. No reg line to deal with either. And that's valid. VR has been a very, very good escape for the furry side of things. You even see VR chat celebrating the regular VR chat side of things, celebrating more the furry side of their social platform. It's growing so much, and it's only going to keep growing because it's that easily accessible for many different people. Now, it's not an end-all be-all either, because not everyone can access VR. So you have the other solution of focusing on smaller local events. That has been something I've personally been doing instead of going to the next big furry convention. I'm not going to be going to MFF this year. I'm going to be doing a friend con again. I'm going to be hanging out and spending time with friends and having a small, fun little get-together. Instead of spending all this money and time trying to get a hotel room, trying to get this and that, trying to get accommodated to at least get there, I'm just going to spend it with the friends that I really want to at that point. While it's kind of cool that tens of thousands of furries will descend on the same city for a weekend to attend the same convention, it would also be cool if there were more local events. Not just weekly or monthly meetups either. I'm thinking of picnics, barbecues, etc. Think global, act local, as it were. And that's been something I've been doing a lot more too. I've been really enjoying the New England side of furry. I haven't really participated in it in the past few years, but I've had friends inviting me recently to go to parties or go to fun adult themed events or go to all sorts of different events put together for the furry fandom. And I'll go to them and I'll have an absolute blast getting to meet new locals, going all around around New England, it's really fun, and I highly recommend trying that out. But obviously, do so safely. You know, you have your own limits too on what you're happy with or comfortable with doing. However, neither idea does anything to alleviate the fear of missing out that can accompany large conventions. Additionally, artists may depend on large conventions as a way to network and grow their audience, which is necessary to make their commission income sustainable. These ideas wouldn't really help them at all. And that is true. You know, some people do need these mainstream conventions to survive and thrive. You don't just go to conventions for the sake of attending it. Sometimes you go for the sake of business, especially if you're in the freelance side of things. And that's something to very much keep in mind. There's only so much you can do if you don't go to conventions either, you know? The online algorithm of social media is a very cruel, cruel place. Solving this problem is outside my wheelhouse. I'm not a social scientist by any means, and this feels like the sort of problem they would be more successful at tackling than a computer security and math nerd. Who knows, maybe to an expert in another field, the solution is more obvious and known to be effective. Or maybe nobody really knows, and we'll have to make something up as we go. Not all that wander are lost. But I sure am. That's me. That's me every single day. That's me. Regardless, being aware of the problem is the first step towards solving it. So if I can do nothing else, I hope to ensure that the folks that enjoy my blog are made aware. Beyond that, my plan is to let people more qualified think about what, if anything, to actually do about the potential mess. Until next time. We love Soa. Soa is such a sweetheart. But that's true. You know, all we can do is just talk about it and express our concerns with it appropriately with those who are able to take charge and who are able to make something about it. And that's what I'm hoping to do with this video too. You know, this is a very, very, very good blog post. I've had these thoughts in the back of my head about furry growing at the rate it is for a long while now. It's not entirely a bad thing either. It's a good thing to see furry growing at the rate it is. It means that it's becoming more of a, I guess, normalized in a good way, hobby for society. You know, it's not as frowned upon as it was years ago, especially when I was getting into it. Like, I was flamed no matter what I did, no matter how well I explained it. But now you see the amount of people that are becoming furries and the amount of people that are supportive of it. It's a very big thing, and it's only going to keep growing. And that's just the thing about furry. Like, it just has this magic to it. And that's what I've worried about with furry conventions growing at the rate they are. I don't want it to get to the point where the magic of that furry convention, the magic of the furry experience, is lost because of its size. Which at the end of the day, you know, the furry convention experience is up to you. It can be magical, or it can just be like, I'm going to hang out and party with friends for the weekend. And that's okay. That is valid on whatever you want to do with it. Maybe I'm just feeling a bit nostalgic. Maybe I'm fitting into that category of people that are wishing for simpler times. But who knows? I'm just here to talk about pretty much what Soa did, because I share the same sentiments, the same concerns about the growth rate of furry and how it's going to affect things in the future. I think the solution here really is as simple as attending smaller local cons and participating in other areas of the fandom. I've talked about it before with furry conventions growing too big and having the alternative of just doing a friend get together during the weekend. You see it many, many times on social media, even though years ago I got flamed hardcore for having a friend con event instead of going to a furry convention. For some reason, by 18-year-olds on the internet who knew everything about the world. Where have we seen this before? This happens like once every 4 to 5 years. At the end of the day, I trust the people in charge to do what is best for the event, because they surely, you know, don't want to invest all this time in it for it to just be a flop. They don't want their con to die out. They don't want people to not go to a con. They want to accommodate everyone. Regardless, this is some really good food for thought, and I wanted to share it with you all today. Like I said, go and check out Soa. His articles will be linked in the description below. Please go and show him some love and support. But on that note, thank you all for watching. And let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. I love whenever I do these in-depth discussion videos about furry, whether it's the culture, some background behind it. All of you have so much to say about it that is so supportive, not of what I say, but just of the subject matter, whether that's arguments for or against it. So I really do appreciate all the words and contributions you guys have to say about these topics. And I'm looking forward to reading what you guys have to say down below. So thank you ahead of time for that. Bye.